Hi, and welcome to the Power of Connection and Biz Show. I'm Kimberly Lane, Executive Leadership Coach, Talent Optimization Partner, best-selling author, and your host. Today's guest is an experienced certified professional coach and an NLP practitioner. She's the founder of Westbourne Associates, where she runs coaching programs, assessments, and workshops for individuals and corporations to help clients feel calm, confident, and ensure that they are operating at their best. From her own personal experience of suffering from anxiety and repeated panic attacks in 2014, she has devised a formula to manage what she calls this generation's panics technique. Through these simple bite-sized techniques, she learned how to manage her own anxiety and has not had a panic attack since 2014. That is over 7 years. Our guest lives in Singapore and spends her free time with her husband chasing after their young kids in the Lion City, and is author of the great book we are going to talk about today called Generation Panic. Please welcome our wonderful guest, Aggie Heal. Aggie, it's great to have you here.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yes.
Me too.
I love the topic you're talking about. I think in today's world, because of all the things that we're experiencing, uncertainty, change, family units change, there's just a lot of external forces on us, which affect obviously your mental health. And it can be like that many of us experience as anxiety provoking. And we all, I think, have degrees of that, right? I really love that you're opening yourself up and really talk about what you suffered in your book and are trying to help others. So I can probably guess, and maybe we can guess why you wrote that, but can you just give us a little more a backstory about how you kind of came to the realization that I want to write this book, and what inspired you and who's it for?
Absolutely. So to rewind slightly, I was really struggling and I was blindsided by it. All of a sudden I was having these panic attacks. I was feeling very anxious, and it wasn't something that I'd really faced before. And I remember that feeling of feeling very isolated, like very lonely. I found it very hard to open up because I'd always kind of dealt with everything. I'd always been able to handle it. And so when I was exploring all these different techniques, I was like, oh my gosh, there's so much out here. I just didn't know. And if I had had access to that information, maybe this all would have been so different. And so I wrote the book really for myself. I was like, great, I want everything in one place where I can return to, so that if ever I'm feeling wobbly or on the back foot in some way, that I have something to return to. And then I just thought, oh my, well, there's going to be some other people like me. Like, I'm not the only one. And if I feel like I'm one of the, historically, I've always been more confident or felt a little stronger. If I get so far like whacked off center, surely there's other people. And so I was like, almost shame on me if I don't make that, those resources available.
No, I love that. I've never, that's an interesting way to start the book, or start a book, if you will. It's almost like your own Cliff Note version of what you need to do to help yourself. And it ends up becoming so much wonderful material, like, let's share it with the world. So kind of taking a step back. So there wasn't really a particular incident that happened, wasn't a particular change in your life or anything that kind of was a catalyst, you think, or the straw that broke the camel's back to kind of where that anxiety started to get and grow to be a bigger issue, or not? And that's okay if it doesn't. I'm just kind of curious.
Yeah. So at the time, a number of things were happening. I'd been promoted to a director. I was managing 3 teams, top biller, like tick, 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 tick. And I was also engaged to be married. So at the time I was like, this is just stress about getting married. This is just overwhelm at this kind of big change. And it was, I don't know, there was a lot going on. But I remember after the wedding, and we got back from our honeymoon, and I got there and I was like, oh no, I'm still feeling like horrendous. And I kind of assumed that everything would be fixed after the wedding, which is kind of interesting as I look back now with the benefit of hindsight. The wedding was nothing really to do with it. Like you say, it was the straw that broke the camel's back, but there was so much in the lead up and all these signs that I missed that were actually showing me that I was struggling far, far earlier than that. But I just kind of, you brush them off. It's like, I just had a poor night's sleep. I'm just feeling a bit more wizzy today. I kind of had missed all these massive red flags waving at my face because I just didn't understand what was even happening.
And so I guess, was there just one incident where all of a sudden, I don't know, you're grocery shopping and you can't find what you need for the kids, or the car breaks down, or whatever? And was there something that was just the clincher, like, I've got to get some help, where I've got to reach out? It's kind of where the bottom falls out, kind of a thing. You just can't keep going, trying to figure it, I'm going to get a better night's sleep, or this is going to go away. You finally just like, I've got to do something about it. And was there a trigger point there?
There was. I think it was my first panic attack, because nothing was hugely different. I remember just being sat at my desk, and there wasn't like a big moment or something went wrong or anything like that. It was just suddenly I felt this rising panic in my body, and all of these horrendous kind of, like my palms were sweating, my heart rate was through the roof. I couldn't concentrate. I felt like I was going to pass out. I felt, that feeling of like all the color draining from your face. And I remember sitting there going, I actually don't know what's happening to me. And I was just terrified. And I thought, I was just so scared of that always happening again, that kind of really drove me to try and work it out, and even just name it.
Yeah, no, I've not had a panic attack, but I do know just the high level of anxiety, how it just takes over you. You can't concentrate, and you just want to get out of your body. It's just, you don't know what to do. It's a very over encompassing feeling. And so, I do want to stress, and what Aggie had said to our listeners, that it can happen to anyone. And, I think we all put a lot of pressure on ourselves, especially if we're type A and overachievers, but it can happen to everybody. And that's really, I think, the point too, and what your message is. And it's more important to realize it and get help sooner rather than later, right?
Absolutely. And I think that, you said at the very beginning, I think this is something that everyone struggles with on some level, right, in some way. And, obviously to varying degrees, there's, but I believe that everyone has like some element of anxiety. It's just how well they're able to handle it, or what tools and techniques that they do have. So you're absolutely not alone. And we're everyone's got it. We live stressful lives. We're in a very fast-paced, heady world. There's a lot of uncertainty, particularly at the moment, a lot of things out of our control. And that's almost like this perfect concoction for feeling a little bit more anxious.
Yes. So for our audience, would you say, are there some symptoms from saying, it's kind of, I don't want, I hate the word normal, but just average anxiety that we are able to continue to function in? And then there's the anxiety that all of a sudden becomes where it's now really threatening our health, our relationships, our, safety to an extent, and, our day-to-day. And so what can you describe when that, if someone's trying to identify for themselves, is this something I need to now reach out to get help? Obviously your book's a great resource, or is this going to kind of like, this is something that's going to pass, or that I'm able to tolerate? Do you understand what I'm asking?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's been tons of brilliant studies around like how people manage pressure and dealing with peak performance. And there's absolutely this kind of bell curve that you can go up, and actually you almost want a little bit of anxiety. There's a real positive element. There's a positive angle about feeling like a little bit more alert and caring. And if you're feeling a bit anxious before a big call or meeting or presentation, actually it kind of makes you a little bit sharper. It might make you prepare a little harder. I think when it tips over and becomes so overwhelming that, as we've discussed, you can't think straight, or you can't answer simple questions, or there's more of a physical response, I think that's a moment to absolutely go and get some help. And, something I see time and time again, people are just like, oh, well, other people have got it worse, so I'm not going to sort myself out, or it doesn't feel that bad, or why should I be complaining? And actually, I don't know, my argument, there's always going to be people above and below you. And just as long as you can make yourself feel a little bit more at ease, wow, what could your life be like if things were a little simpler or a little easier? So it's always worth, if you're in any doubt, I'd absolutely reach out to someone, anyone, Regeneration Panic, see if it resonates. There's lots you can do.
Yes, I totally agree. When I coach individuals, at the end of the day, I always share that our happiness is up to us. And our happiness can't be defined by where other people are in their journey or in their life. And so if you don't feel happy, it's up to you to figure out and correct that. And some people may still be happy with a low grade of anxiety. You know what I mean? Everybody's different. So if you're not happy and feeling healthy and feeling your best, it's up to you to change that and seek that help. And it's okay to do that. You know, we all have a right. We deserve to be happy and live without a lot of pain and anxiety to our best way we can minimize that. So that's
agreed.
Yeah. So perfect. Go ahead.
Just to add to that, I was going to say, what can become scary though is that how quickly something can become normal. So that's just the only thing to watch out for is, in particular, the Heart Math Institute have done a number of researches around baseline states, and we almost become, so if you're used to like a little bit more anxiety or a little bit more stress, our body kind of starts to tick along at a little bit of a higher level, and then that becomes our normal. So particularly if you're a busy person, all of a sudden, if you're not busy, you're like, wow, how am I going to get back to that baseline? Whereas actually it's retraining ourselves that our baseline can be lower. Does that make sense?
No, but it makes total sense.
Setting the temperature on a
Yeah.
heating or an aircon or something.
Yeah, it's like whatever the whole story is, you know, put a frog in boiling water and he'll jump out, but put it in, you know, cold water and slowly turn up the heat, he'll become boiled because he adjusts. And so it's kind of like you just raise your tolerance level, and it's, you know, even when you're like watching your children grow, you know, you're with them every day, you might not see the changes. Maybe your relatives, like in 3 months, oh my gosh, Henry's 4 inches taller, and oh my gosh, you know what I mean? Like you just, you know, he's growing. But my point being is it's more exaggerated when someone from objectively is looking in and can see the difference, you know, versus the day-to-day changes, right? So, was there anybody in your life that was commenting to you that you seem different or anything? I'm just trying to wonder if, you know, if you were getting cues from your external, and those are things we also need to listen to when friends and family are commenting that, you know, we seem a little more upset or short or just not ourselves, or, you know, just curious.
At the time, no. I think that I was very good at masking or hiding it, and just so intent on seeming like I had everything put together and like I could handle it. But interestingly, after I had the awareness, and obviously those in my inner circle had the awareness, there were definitely times after that, in particular, my husband would say, things feel like a little tighter, or you seem a little bit more irritable or tireder, or you're not sleeping as, and just all of these little signs again. And that's helpful when you've got someone who can be that sounding board, or the kind of almost a mirror of things that you can't see, or like, you know, just kind of take it as is. That could be very helpful.
No, having someone else as your, you know, buying in someone else to be your gauge, I think is really helpful. And then it brings them to help understand you. And I think it also, to an extent, you realize you're not alone. And I think that can be very supportive too in the process. So awesome.
Yes.
I am dying to really understand and dive in a little bit more about the title. What do you mean about your title, Generation Panic? And explain that a little further. I think it's a great title.
Thank you. So I wrote the book about 5 years ago now. And at the time, when I was looking around, you know, when I was first having my panic attacks, I was 25, 26. And I remember looking around and just thinking, these kind of 20 years that we were in, like 20s to 30s, are people who are really struggling. You know, there's so much change. There's a lot of flux. You have people who are anywhere from like trying to figure out what their careers are or jobs are, to people who are very established or starting their own business, or you have people who are very single, to people who are divorced with kids. You know, it's just a crazy couple of years. And I think people within that are trying to keep up with social media and making sure they look right, and they're keeping, you know, they're on their workout, they're putting the right things in their body. So there's just a lot of pressure. It felt like Generation Panic was that kind of age group that were really keen to keep up. But what's interesting, and almost like my naivety, is that I wrote this 5 years ago, and you know, from all the conversations that I've had, particularly over the last 2 years, and the book was released in May last year, is that this is not age specific, and the tools are very applicable to people of all ages of life. And you know, what I've realized is that everyone struggles, and particularly with the last couple of years. So that's been almost the kind of surprise and beauty of the book, is that I mean, I've received emails from teenagers. I've spoken to schools, but also I've got emails from, I got one from a 92-year-old woman the other day who was reading it and said, I never realized that it could be easier. So Generation Panic, I feel like, has expanded its arms. It's like welcomed in anyone who might be struggling.
Yeah, I was wondering if it was kind of a play on, Generation X or Generation Y. And I agree with you. It's more as whoever is living in today's world, I don't care what age you are suffering, more likely to suffer, some form of well-being disruption and an exorbitant amount of stress, an exorbitant amount of change, an exorbitant amount of uncertainty, and, consequently possible anxiety. And so I think we're all running a higher level than maybe individuals did definitely 50 years ago, definitely 30 years ago, right? I think the last decade, it's really been elevated, just like since I think around when cell phones got invented. I do a lot of research on and talking on the isolation epidemic, which is really kind of gotten magnified with the onset of this wonderful technology we have, but it's also creating a disconnect. And I think that also contributes to the level of anxiety, because we don't have the social connection or the touch that is so important to us from subconsciously the way we are created, and our need for social connection. So that's a whole nother topic. But my point being is, I think it's a very relevant book. I think it's an excellent book. I really encourage our readers to reach out to Aggie for the link for the Audible, or definitely to purchase her book as well. And you'll have all that in the show notes. But before we leave, I do want Aggie to share if she has kind of 3 quick tips on how to manage anxiety from your book.
Oh my gosh, 3 quick tips out of all of them. I mean, I could pick.
There's 20 million, but I'm sure, I mean, it's a process, right? But just, yeah, or any just words of advice you want to leave for our audience. That's, something that's a takeaway. If it's a simple, what was the first one you wrote?
Oh, the first one I wrote, I actually can't remember. I think it was just more like I had access to all these different things. And just to kind of say that that's almost the beauty of the book, is that there's over 100 different tools, and you as the reader get to decide what's going to work best for you. So whenever I get asked, like, what are my favorite tips, they genuinely change, like from one day to the next, or whatever situation that I'm facing, they will shift. However, I mean, I'll just pick 3 today. One that I really love is called the Heartbeat Tapper. And it's basically talking about, and you just mentioned the kind of connection between our body and our minds, and how important that is. And when we're feeling anxious in particular, people often describe like an increase in heart rate, and that kind of cortisol and adrenaline starts to get pumping around your body. And the Heartbeat Tapper is just quite simply on your wrist, just tapping up and down at a slower rate than your heart. And it's almost like, I don't know if you know, in Asia, they've got dragon boats, and they have a drummer at the front who kind of sets the tone and the pace of the rowers in the boat. It's almost like that. You're kind of trying to captain your body and make sure that your heart rate drops to a level that you can then begin to think clearly. You're not in that fight or flight response. You're not panicking. You're able to like deal with it rationally. So that's one that I always love. And another one that I often do is, like, again, with the body, is just, for me, when I feel anxious, it's like electricity is running around my body. It just gets faster and faster. And just like even kind of rubbing down and like flicking off all that extra energy to almost like clear my body and kind of bring that calmness and that solidity, that groundedness back to me. Love that one. And breathing. It's the easiest way to change how your state is at any given moment. It's with you everywhere. If you're in a meeting that you're really struggling, you can do some deep breathing with no one knowing, and kind of recenter yourself. So yeah, those would be the 3 that I'd pick. This morning. I'm
sorry, this morning? What did you say?
Yeah, I did this morning. I mean,
you got it. Okay,
we can have a call in an hour, and I'd be like, oh, okay, here's my top 3 now.
No, those are wonderful things to suggest. I always, when I find myself stressed, we naturally tighten up and we constrict everything. And so I just encourage myself to take 3 deep
Yeah.
breaths, right? And that just naturally will sink your shoulders again and you're not so crunched up. So I love that.
Yes.
And yes,
and
for
like
sure.
just the opposite. Like if you're feeling like this, then think, what's the opposite? Can I open my arms right up? You know, Amy Cuddy's TED Talk is all about changing your physical state. So yes.
Yes. And then I also practice Reiki do that on others. And there's a whole, and I do believe in the whole energy piece, and anxiety is a whole energy field too, and a vibration you're giving off. And, you know, there's other stuff going on. And so clearing your energy field, I think, is a conscious decision and will totally help in that whole management of anxiety. And we practice that in Reiki, helping change people's energy fields or clearing out unwanted beings, things, whatever. So that's, I think that's a whole nother conversation, but the whole study of energy and healing and how it affects us mentally and physically.
Absolutely. Well, we have such an impact, don't we? So, you know, we all have that feeling when you walk in a room and you can feel that someone's like bristly or a little bit anxious, and we pick up on that. That's another chapter, is like working out who you're spending your time with, and is it positive for you? Is it working? Is it the right kind of people with the right kind of energy? And if it's not, then maybe this is the time to consider changing it.
Exactly. Trust your gut, trust your intuition. So
absolutely.
Well, we are wrapping up. I always like to give my guests an opportunity to leave one thought. Again, everything about Aggie and how to get her book and access her a link to her Audible, I will share in the show notes. But any other little message you'd like to leave our audience?
I'm actually just going to follow up on what you just said about trusting your gut. And I think that's the biggest thing, is that if we're really honest with ourselves, we know when something's up, we know when something's wrong, and trusting your intuition, you know what to do. You know if you need help, if someone's really struggling, you're absolutely not on your own. So there are people, there are resources, there's things you can do, and things can get better. It doesn't need to be this hard. It doesn't have to be. You have a choice.
No, that I really love, Aggie. We all have a choice in how we want to live our life, and however you're feeling today does not have to be the way you feel tomorrow. You have the power to change it, and there's a lot of people that care and want to help you. So to our wonderful listeners, thank you for joining us. It's such a joy, as always, to see your wonderful reviews, and thank you for subscribing to the Power of Connection and Biz on YouTube. And to Aggie, I love the work you're doing. Mental health, as we talked about in the beginning, is such a key issue today in our multi-generational today, if you will, and unfortunately probably will be in our future, just given what's going on in our world today. So I encourage you to reach out to Aggie, get access to her Audible, get her book. You could probably even reach out to her to have a one-on-one dialogue, I'm sure. So Aggie, you're doing wonderful work. Thank you so much for being on the show today. And to everybody, remember, connections change everything.